Morning, y'all. So this is day 16 with this group of Cornish Rock Cross meat chickens. I believe there's 426 in this group. We've actually just opened up barn doors. So for day 16, this is the first few moments that they're interacting with sunlight. Sunlight triggers response in the pineal gland in chickens and in humans. But we definitely see in chickens a strong reaction to sunlight. So we love getting the barn doors open. And that is, if you're, look at that, and look at that. Like at the feeder, okay, look at the feeder. There's a row of feeders there. And then furthest out, the water, they're all ringed up around the water. They've all made a ring up around this water. There is something on the floor quality I want to show you as why we're recording from this angle at this moment. But it's just amazing. Before I opened the door up, and even the very first few moments with the camera that y'all could see, the birds were all like over there. Not a whole lot of activity, but as soon as the sunlight came into their pen, we get all this activity. We get them triggered to an active period. They're eating, they're drinking, they're up on their legs. That's what we want. We want to see them up on their legs a lot. So I was going to say, even if your birds are indoors, like these birds are raised in a barn, start to finish in a barn. But the barn was designed for meat birds, and the barn was designed with big doorways on every side of the barn so that we can actually open up all four sides of the barn if we want to. So that every day, the goal is every day the barn doors are open and the birds experience the benefits of open air and outside with the protection of with the protection of being in a building, and as much protection from predator threats as we can give them, and as much protection from extreme weather threats as we can give them. Because even the sunlight, we want all the benefit for the birds of the interaction with the sunlight. But on the other hand, if they were outdoors and had no protection from the sunlight, that could tip a threshold where it could be a detriment itself to the birds. So we want, to maximize the strength and minimize the things that could be potential problems. Even indoors, you can take steps to make sure that you provide some sunlight exposure and some sunlight interaction for your birds. Certainly, that would be an advantage to raising birds outdoors, pastured, or in a chicken tractor situation. You're going to get a lot of that outdoor element maximized. But the fact is, with meat chickens, it's not realistic to have them pastured from start to finish. So regardless of how you grow and finish them, in the middle of production at the end of production, you still have to have a plan for some kind of confinement situation where the birds are protected, especially in the beginning, and certainly in the beginning where ambient conditions are addressed. Okay, so 4 minutes in, and what I really wanted to actually tell you from this angle, right here around this water is a great example. So when you're raising meat birds, and this is going to apply across the board, whether we're indoors in a confinement with them or whether you have them out on pasture. Inside, we call this concept floor quality. If you have them pastured or in a chicken tractor, I don't know if you're going to call it floor quality, but you're still going to need to be concerned about what's going on under the birds at ground level that their feet are in contact with and that their body is in contact with when they sit down, lay down. We have pastured Cornish Rock Cross meat chickens in the past, and we still have the same thing happen. Their manure load is going to coat whatever surface they're living on. So if they're in a chicken tractor, that's one of the reasons chicken tractors have to be mobile and have to be moved. That's one of the reasons you really can't just put pastured chickens in a small confinement area like the chicken tractor container and leave them there, because they're going to coat the surface that they're living on. That will still happen on grass. That's why they would have to be, one reason they would have to be moved. But we see it in a confinement system and we have to manage for it. But this water, I think even on camera, this water can give y'all a really good visual of what happens. So the water is not leaking. What I hope y'all can see is the bedding that we've built up on the floor in their space here. Some areas of it are lighter, some areas of it are darker. So where it's more saturated and more compacted, we get that darker look, like right around the water. The bedding material is noticeably more saturated and compacted right up close to the water. And as you get away from the water, you can see where the bedding is not as saturated. So like over closer to that feeder, for example. This is going to happen around your waters as just a normal course of operations, because one of the things we frequently see with the meat chickens is when they go to the water, they stand there, and while they're at the water, they're going to manure. And so that manure load is getting really concentrated around the waters. So I definitely can see it at this one. And even over here on the far right, I actually can see the saturation in the bedding around those as well. Both of those, by the way, do need refilled. So you're going to see that with your meat birds. First of all, you're just going to see in general, as they grow, a heavier and heavier manure load from them on whatever surface they're on. You're going to have to manage for that. Also, you're going to see a heavier concentration of manure load around the waters. So we do a couple of things to manage for this. You can do 3 things to help manage the floor quality or even the ground quality under your birds. You can give them additional floor space as needed, or in the case of chicken tractor birds, you can move their chicken tractor around as needed, and that's probably going to be daily. You're definitely going to get to a point where that's going to be daily. And if they're just pastured loose, they just need adequate space to not be sitting in their own manure constantly. So addressing the floor space issue or the pen space issue, that's one thing you can do to manage floor quality. Another thing we can do to manage floor quality is occasionally shift where they're watering. Shift where they're watering so that we rest that a little bit and it stops getting additional load there. And the other thing you can do if you're indoors is use bedding frequently to keep the absorbency power of that material high enough to take the manure load. And even if they're outdoors, probably around where your waters are, you probably could put down some pelleted bedding and let it do its work, because as it absorbs moisture, it'll plump back up and it'll expand and it'll be an effective moisture absorber. So you could even do that if you run into an issue for some reason outdoors around the water. But if your birds are outside, if you're using a chicken tractor and you're moving them, that should never become an issue. And if they're on pasture that has adequate space for them, it shouldn't really become an issue either. You might need to shift your waters out there, though, so that it doesn't become an issue around the waters. But anyway, that really is, I don't know if you can get a better sense of it there. For some reason, we had a different shadow. But yeah, you can see there. You can see there how we do have a heavy load around that water. more noticeably than further out from it. But you want to stay ahead of that. Staying ahead of taking care of that keeps the pen from becoming smelly. It keeps it more comfortable for your birds. They stay cleaner, and it's definitely better for their health. So you want to keep enough bedding material in there if you're raising them indoors that you've got something absorbing the actual manure load itself and the moisture from it and the fumes from it. So these birds are doing great. But that's really cool because in this video, look what y'all got to see. You saw their first interaction with sunlight for day 16. You saw it trigger an activity period in the flock, and you've actually seen that activity period run its course. It only took about 10 minutes for that activity period to actually run its course. Most of the birds in the flock would have gone to food and water at that point. And then when I'm in the pen working on bedding, that's going to trigger the birds to stir again. So maybe any that were along the walls and maybe choose not to get up, they're going to be triggered to become active for a little bit. But that's what Cornish cross meat chickens do in this middle part of production. They shift from that busybody activity of baby chicks more into this growing meat bird mode. And that's why we do really delineate some phases in their production, and that's why we call the first couple of weeks the starter phase, and we call this middle couple of weeks the grower phase, and then we call the last couple of weeks the finish phase, because we actually see a difference in the bird in what we believe is going on with their growth. So it's pretty amazing. I know a lot of people are just kind of overwhelmed at the fact that, like, looking at these birds, that they're going to turn into something ready to butcher for poultry in about a month from now. They're going to be like maybe 7-8 pounds and be really finished for meat production. And it's hard to believe that, because when you look at them day 16, they still have a cute angle to them. They're not awkward very much yet. And just 16 days ago, they were the size of a chicken egg. And so it's like people want to make them kind of a freak of nature, but they're not. This is selective breeding. They're different than a designer dog that was selectively bred to not shed. You know, that could be considered a freak of nature too, right? Instead, these are chickens that are selectively bred to grow rapidly and to convert feed to meat efficiently and to distribute the meat onto the chicken breast, the drumsticks, and the thighs. And so they really will be ready for butchering and processing at day 42. So let me work on the pen, and then I'll give you some parting shots with the bedding top dressed and with this water and feeder row swapped. All right, got most of the pen cleanup done here. So got the bedding down that we just had one bale of it, so 3 cubic foot, and just top dressed the area. The entire area is probably about 20 by 20, but we concentrated the bedding more over here on this half, where now I have all the feeders and waters over here, and did a shallower skim of the bedding over on that side. Turned off the heat lamps. I'm sure we're going to top 80 degrees Fahrenheit today in Southeast Ohio, and it is warm in here in the barn. the birds themselves, the body heat generating from them, some of the heat quality coming off the manure load that's already on the floor. We've got plenty of warmth for this group of birds. 16 days old, we want it about 80 degrees Fahrenheit ambient conditions. They love the brand new bedding. They love it. I did go ahead and put scrap wood risers under the feeders. And we do that to try to get the tray about the height of the bird's back. This bird here sitting on its haunches is actually showing us we could probably put another riser under there. So I have some half width pieces I'm going to actually put under at least these two as well, and try to get that up just slightly higher than the waters. We'll also need to get them on risers today. Risers also help prevent them kicking the fresh bedding into the water trays. I just cleaned all these water trays, but just them moving around the trays, they're kicking some bedding into it, and I still need to refill those two. So we don't have any feeders or waters over there, which you can see at this point, the size the birds are getting. They're filling up this. This is basically the size space we used more or less for brooding them. For brooding, they pretty much stayed under the heat lamps, and we kept all their resources right there. Now they're in the grower phase. They're filling up more of the floor space. They also can tolerate more flux and temperature. That's why we moved their resources a little further away. They'll be willing to come back and forth to the resources. We're going to be using the heat lamps less and less, but we're also going to find that they're going to fill this floor space, and they're going to need more. So actually, that's also going to go on the agenda for today. We're going to add at least one crate length to this north-south wall. We're going to bump, and then that's going to give them a little bit more room over here around their feeders and waters. And we'll have to get more bedding and put down more bedding. So probably going to put in an order for 2 more bales of bedding. At least one will go over there, and one will go over here where we open this up just a little bit. And that'll get them set on bedding probably through the weekend, I would estimate. So 426 birds, day 16. Cornish rock cross meat chickens on their way to being finished at 6 weeks old. Yes, just at a month and a half. But at a month and a half, on a production system that supports their nutritional needs and the ambient conditions that they want, you can have a meat bird finished and end up with an outcome of about a 5 to 7 frozen whole chicken in your freezer from your efforts raising Cornish rock cross meat chickens. So let us know any questions you have. We're always happy to try to help answer them, because we've learned it by trial and error. Trust me, we've made the mistakes, and we've learned the things that don't work. Therefore, we know a lot of things that do. So we appreciate y'all. We appreciate y'all. God bless you. We've had a heck of a week. It's finally Thursday, and I'm glad, because this week has been rough here at Twin Oaks Family Farm on us. It's kind of kicking our bottom, but I think we got it all going in the right direction now. So short update on, we had the 4 hens that were slow growers in flock 1 that were now out to like 9 weeks old and past finished. We took them to a livestock auction in Mount Hope, Ohio. We got some video on our road trip, not on the auction site or on the birds, but on our road trip. And we got another video from the day before we went to the auction, because we took 50 of our laying hens to the auction over at Mount Hope, Ohio. We still have about 35 laying hens, plus the 19 pullets with the 1 roux in there. So all birds together on farm right now, chicken population, I believe, is 480. But yeah, this week has handed it to us, and we're regrouping from it, and I got a lot of farm work to do. But y'all supporting the channel is a really huge help. So thanks so much. We appreciate it. Let us know what you're doing, especially if you're like raising food. And also, if you have tips to help each other, like seeking out farmers in your area and sourcing food directly from producers, we encourage y'all to do that. We call that Heart Local Ag. So Heart Local Ag, wherever local is for you. God bless y'all. Have a great day. We're close to the weekend. Almost there.